Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Tailosive Tech Live on YouTube. Happy Monday. We're halfway through May, which means another month closer to iPhone 15 season. Can you believe it? September is now less than 5 months away. Oh my God. And then, yeah, we're coming up on like 4 months away until this stuff can actually be legitimately confirmed rather than just rumors. But yeah, the most recent one is kind of one we were hoping for a while. And yes, I'm still trying to push all of our leak coverage to more of the live stream stuff to get your guys' perspective on it, your guys' ideas. Probably talking less about the leaks themselves in video form. But the latest one is that the regular iPhone 15s, which honestly, the more I hear about them, the more they sound like actually not terrible deals. I don't know what other people are saying. Obviously, it sucks that they're still 60 hertz at the high price they are, but just an iPhone with USB-C and with Dynamic Island, and now this new report is that they'll get the 48 megapixel main sensor that we saw on the 14 Pros last year. So if you bring down that super high resolution sensor to the cheaper iPhones, that allows you to obtain, it's kind of a cheat, but in iOS code it would be the 2x telephoto option. So that gives you 2x optical zoom, which is mainly just pinching in on a 48 megapixel sensor so that you still get a full 12 megapixel image. But a lot of people like that feature on the 14 Pros. You know, it allows you to still have that portrait mode at the 2x button. And on top of that, there's still rumored to be a periscope lens for the 15 Pro Max, which last I heard, the report is that it would be a 6x optical zoom. So the Pro Max would obviously get a ton of zoom enhancement, but I don't know, 6x was kind of lackluster to me personally. I was kind of half expecting it to be more in line with like 10x or maybe more. At least that's what I'm used to seeing with you know, periscope lenses on phones, because you're putting this whole lens system in sideways. That feels like you better be able to basically zoom in on the moon. But yeah, this is from last month, so I'm kind of coupling a few different reports together, but this is the one I'm referring to. Brought to you by T-Mobile everywhere. Periscope lens would be exclusive to the Pro Max, though. That's what's kind of I was thinking about after setting the title and thumbnail for this stream. Was like, well, wait a second. I guess that means the regular 15s should get a 2x option, even though they don't technically have their own dedicated telephoto lens. And then the 15 Pro Max will get a 2x and then a 6x option. But I suppose the one iPhone 15 that might be the exception that doesn't get better zoom is the regular 15 Pro. That one is not rumored to get the periscope lens, and it already has the 48 megapixel sensor, so that one might actually stay the same. Good morning, Lord Zero. Thanks for tuning in. 16 months of support. Appreciate that. I got picked as the guy who would invent the next iPhone in my school, which I'm very happy about. That's cool. Probably they didn't mean the iPhone 15. You mean like the next big thing, I assume. And thank you, Randall, for 22 months of support. Oh my gosh, that's a long time. Thank you. They don't do S upgrades anymore. The 14 should be the 13S, but again, they don't do that anymore. Or the 13 should be the 12S, and the 14 should be the 13. Yeah, the S's are kind of out the window. So I don't think there will be an S. Are they going to increase price for those editions, perhaps starting at $8.99? Honestly, that would be surprising. I don't think Apple was too impressed by the sales of the regular 14 and 14 Plus. I think that was honestly just because this was the year they decided to not give a full chip upgrade to every model. You know, they only gave the A16 chip to the Pros. I think that is why inherently the 14 and 14 Plus will pretty much always and forever be known as one of the smallest iPhone upgrades of all time, because the display didn't change. At least the 13 to 14. Same notch, basically same A15 chip, same camera arrangement, practically same battery life. There was just so little changes year over year that it was so difficult to justify, especially when Apple was still selling the iPhone 13. But to me, it feels like there's a lot more noticeable differences from the 14 to the 15, but because Apple was not too impressed, I think the prices of the regular 15 and 15 Plus are going to stay the same, but they're going to increase the price on the Pros because so many people opted for the Pro this past year that they decided, we're probably convincing by keeping the price of the 14 Plus versus 14 Pro so similar, we're convincing a lot of people to just opt for the Pro because a lot of us are not paying full price, unlocked. They're buying them on contract through their carrier, or they're doing some trade-in deal, and it's a difference of a couple bucks for a lot of people to go for the Pro. And there's likely, as we've discovered, phones are very useful, very necessary for a lot of our lives. That's why so many people are willing to go all out with their smartphone purchase, that Apple can probably secure some more margin, and they're probably not going to scare away that many potential buyers by increasing the prices of the Pro, whereas the regular iPhone 15s, I think, will probably stay the same, personally. 15 should get USB-C, which will be the biggest change for most people. Yeah, I agree. That's only happened once in the history of the iPhone has the port ever changed, and this is the second time in all of iPhone's history, even though it's kind of an inevitable one. It was kind of one we all saw coming. At least now, it feels like a couple of years ago, no one saw it coming. Everyone said that the iPhone would go portless, and I kept saying how horrible of an idea that would be, but this is starting to feel a bit more believable. 10s changes a lot of things for the iPhone. I think it's underrated. 10s was small, but I would still argue that the 14 from the 13 was much smaller. It was a lackluster compared to the predecessor 11 Pro. Wait, which one? Joshua says, I want a 7.5-inch iPhone Mega. Honestly, after checking out the iPad Mini, I felt like I would rather just have a small tablet that has iPhone features like, SIM tray. Well, they don't get that anymore. But eSIM, at least, that can take texts and phone calls, not just data, and Apple Watch connectivity, that kind of thing. Like, if an iPad Mini could do everything an iPhone could software-wise, I'd rather just stuff that in my pocket than have a foldable, to be honest. The folding tech just makes it so much more expensive. I think over time there proved to be a lot of differences between the A11 chip and the A12, but when it first debuted, it was not super noticeable. Whereas iPhone 14 and 13, they both have the A15 chip, so I don't think there's going to be a bunch of features that the 14 gets that the 13 doesn't over time. Hey, Nicholas is in the chat. Nicholas, special shout out to Linthicum for signing up for Tailosive Tech Ultra. If you want to schedule the collab or whatever, the call, feel free to do so via Twitter. I appreciate you signing up. We have a surprising number of people that signed up for Tailosive Tech Ultra, way more than I expected. I might need to rethink the prices and the tiers because it's kind of ridiculous. But thank you, Nicholas, for supporting. I appreciate that. Just means a voice app for the iPad and a calculator app and optimized battery charging and an Apple Watch app and a wallet app. Honestly, there's a bunch of things the iPad needs. I want a 120 hertz non-pro iPhone. I would have to wait years for it, to having to pay more money for a pro version just for that. I would say if you don't want to pay the price of a pro iPhone and you still want 120 hertz, just get a used or refurbished or Amazon renewed 13 Pro. Those have probably gone down in price a lot since they came out because they're coming up on 2 years old now. And buttery smooth display, okay, you don't get your dynamic island, but Ross Young, I think, said that ProMotion will be coming to, when was it? I think it was the iPhone 17 series would get ProMotion on the regular models. But yeah, I personally, I completely understand why Apple doesn't put that on the cheaper iPhone, because as cool as I think it is, everyday consumers just do not care. Like, I've tried to show it off to people, be like, oh, can you tell how smooth it is? And they don't notice or care. So to me, it's the perfect description of something that's like, it's a pro feature. It's it's something that the techies are more likely to care about that the everyday consumers are not. And the lower end, cheaper iPhones are meant for the everyday consumer, not the techies. But they're kind of in a weird position because they're still the new iPhone. They're still getting refreshed every year. But I think most of their job, most of their purpose is to just make the 15 lineup or the 14 lineup seem cheaper, starting at, $7.99 when you buy through contract, whatever. And wireless charging. Yeah, that's all hardware stuff. I'm willing to put up with some iPad hardware compromises, but Nicholas says, I would love to see you review some Steve Jobs era retro Apple tech. If you could, I would love to see your take on that. I don't have a lot, but I do have some older tech that it's just there's a lot of new stuff coming all at once that I'm got a big list of things that I'm going down on. But I think the Steve Jobs era tech is more history lesson because he's been gone over 10 years now. There's not a lot of Steve Jobs era stuff that I think people could genuinely use. It's just for the sake of collecting, which I'm not that interested in. I mean, I've got my boxes for my background, but I only do that because people get upset when I take them down. I tried to do a background without the boxes and everyone freaked out. But like, I think there's a lot of dangers and clutter that can come from just trying to collect old tech, and I try to not hang on to tech that I don't use all that much because it just fills up space. And most of the Steve Jobs era tech was, bigger computers that have to find a desk or find a shelf to sit on. The smaller stuff is easier to store, like the original iPhone and stuff. And I've done videos on this before. And lots of people have been doing original iPhone type stuff before. There's only so much you can say about it because it's kind of dated now and it's not changing that much over time. And because it's so old, it's hard to recommend. It's not new enough that you can like recommend people, oh, you should go back to using that. It's like, no, it wouldn't really work. None of the apps are going to do anything, and the cell towers aren't going to work with your old hardware. Yeah, it's just it's hard. There's less things to talk about. It's kind of interesting to just play around with for a few seconds, but I'm trying to find ways of reviewing cheaper hardware, which typically involves older hardware. I tend to think that going secondhand, like refurbished or renewed, is better than buying new budget phones. Like, I think the iPhone SE2 is a much better deal than buying a brand new SE3. Sure, the SE3 has an A15 chip and 5G, but this is still holding up pretty well, and you can find it for like $100 on eBay refurbished, which is pretty dang affordable. And you're still getting software updates because it's got the A13 chip. So, yeah, the Wi-Fi probably won't even work with modern routers on the original iPhone. So yeah, that's why I consider it. It's like history lesson type reviews, which is just like reminding you what the specs are, which you can kind of look up on your own. So I don't find it very unique or like inherently very valuable, but it's fun for nostalgic's sake. But I've already got a few things in mind for what to basically keep us busy until Dub comes around, and then I think there will be lots of new things to talk about. But yeah, I'll address some of the pre-asked questions from Tailosive Tech Pro members, starting with Marngel. Thank you for your support. Have you decided on whether you're going to buy and return an M1 iPad Pro to check out Final Cut Pro? I hope you do check it out. I'm tempted to get it, even if I have to upgrade my iPad, but I want to see what other video editors think of it. Yeah, I'm still kind of torn. I feel like most of you guys probably really want me to, so I probably will, but I don't know. I'm not really happy with either result because I get the feeling just by the way they demonstrated it in the announcement video. Like, I saw them showcase this kind of redesigned touch optimized version of Final Cut, which, okay, it's cool that it's touch optimized, but I think I got into this on the podcast as well. It's like the reason people were asking for Final Cut on the iPad, they weren't asking for iMovie Plus. They weren't asking for enhanced versions of what's already on the iPad. They were asking for something that they already know. They were asking for something they're already comfortable with on their Mac, and they just wanted that app on the iPad also. So that they could do the same things that they can do on the Mac on their iPad, which I guess some people are overall against because they're like, well, the iPad's supposed to be different, it's supposed to be unique, and it has to be separate from the Mac. It's not allowed to be the same as the Mac, which is like, okay, but now you're bringing Mac apps that are not on anything else. Thank you, Crystal, for the super chat. Love the channel, been watching for years. Well, that's unnecessary. You had a super chat just for that, but thank you. I appreciate it. I just feel bad when people do one message, one thing, super chats, because it's like that could pay for a month of Tailosive Tech Pro or two months of Tailosive Tech Plus, and then you can, I don't know, get a lot more interaction in the member streams and that kind of thing. But either way, thank you. Appreciate the super chat. But like, if we can't do or use Final Cut in the exact same ways we can on our Mac, then I'm kind of perplexed on why bother calling it Final Cut at all. If it's going to offer a separate set of features that the Mac doesn't have, but also remove some of the features. So I think that's what's likely the most common scenario. I think what will happen if I do get an M1, I'm not going to get the M2. Just full warning you guys now. I've had a bad experience with the M2 chip. It ruined one of our podcasts, and it's basically just an overclocked M1. It gets hotter, and the differences in actual performance between M1 versus M2 is so minor, so insignificant, that I just don't see the point in spending the extra money, even if it's just for a review purpose. So I would very likely just buy, again, if I'm reviewing it, I would want to buy something with a decent return window, and Amazon Renewed, I believe, has 90-day return windows, whereas Apple has like a 14-day return window. So if I was buying it to review stuff, and I've got a big trip coming up, so I'm kind of torn on how many things I want to buy up and then have to send back right away. But I think what is most likely if I do buy an M1 iPad Pro to review Final Cut is that I will try it out and I'll say it's pretty good, but it's missing a lot of things that I prefer on my Mac. So I guess it's better than iMovie, but I don't know if it's better than DaVinci. And, I'm kind of inherently against this converting one-time purchase applications into memberships, the $5 a month, because they can change the price over time of that as they... Why did continuity camera suddenly decide to turn on? Like, OBS has been open for 20 minutes. That's so weird. I'm just going to hit disconnect. Okay. The M2 to you was the A10X Fusion to me. I guess? Or the A10 Fusion is what you said. See, YouTube needs to remove that live reaction button. I don't think it's doing very much. It's not very helpful. I feel like they just stole that from Twitter and Instagram or whatever. Instagram probably stole it from someone else. I would probably try it and be like, yeah, pretty good, but not as good as the Mac, so it doesn't really solve my issue. Or maybe I'm wrong. I'm willing to admit I've been wrong a lot, so maybe I get it completely backwards, and I get Final Cut on the iPad, and now I'm like, wow, this is great. This is just as good as the Mac, or it's better. I don't think this is a likely scenario, but I'm willing to entertain it's possible because I haven't actually used the app yet. So maybe there's some updates, maybe there's some reworks, or maybe when you connect a keyboard and trackpad, it works just as good as it does on the Mac. Okay, maybe I try it out and I really like it. Okay, now I have to spend $5 a month on Final Cut. And I'll probably run into different issues where, okay, the app itself is good, but I still can't replace my Mac because my Mac has the better battery life, it has the better ports, and something that is, for better or for worse, it's just become a fundamental part of my business now, thanks to all the green names you guys see in the chat. You guys are the awesome channel members that are supporting me on a monthly basis. We do behind-the-scenes filming and editing streams for those guys, so they get to watch me film the video, see all the mistakes, all the things I cut out, and then I import and I'm screen capturing, and capturing my webcam, capturing my display, capturing my audio, and I'm live streaming the process of me editing a video. I don't believe the iPad is going to be capable of doing that. For one, it doesn't even have OBS, and it's very complicated to capture the display and stream. Just trying to do this, what I'm doing right now, which is not even screen capturing, just talking into a camera and a microphone is a lot harder to do stream to YouTube on an iPad. I know this because I've tried, in doing the overlays and the animations when you guys donate, so... That's why, from the beginning, I've tried to be consistent about this, because I was worried that basically what a lot of people said when Final Cut came out for the iPad happened. They would accuse me of being hypocritical or never satisfied. No, what I literally said in videos prior about the iPad is that it's not one or two apps away. Like, I'm not trying to make the case that the iPad would suddenly become a pro device if it just gained 2 or 3 applications. Because truthfully, LumaFusion and DaVinci Resolve are great video editing apps that have been on the iPad. Okay, LumaFusion's been on the iPad for years, but not DaVinci. So they've been on the iPad for a while, and they're very capable. They have lots of options, lots of color correction, and there's even lots of great audio mixing and audio editing apps on the iPad. Like, there's third-party supported options. And yeah, like, we used the Final Cut not on the iPad thing as an example of Apple doesn't care that much, but it wasn't like just by adding Final Cut that would solve all our problems. Like, to me, my issue is that because the iPad is hardware constrained compared to the Mac in terms of the display size or the ports or the speakers or the thermal management systems and that kind of thing, because there's so many like hardware limitations, but they still have the same chip at least. They've got an M1 chip in there, an M2 chip in there. So now there's iPad Pros with technically higher performing chips than an iMac. No iMac has the M2 chip still to this day. Then my argument is that then there shouldn't be any software compromises. There's already hardware compromises, but we know that it's possible to run Mac OS on an M1 and M2 chip without a fan. Sure, the battery life may be limited and the I/O may be limited, but if you're already putting up with those hardware limitations, there shouldn't be any software compromises. Anything your Mac can do software-wise, the iPad should be able to do because it has the same silicon. It has keyboard and mouse support. It has a display. It has speakers. It has biometrics. It has all of the essential requirements. It has all of the Mac OS ingredients, but without all of the Mac OS capabilities. And that is not a limitation of, oh, well, it doesn't have the battery for it or it doesn't have the ports for it. No, you don't need those ports to run Mac OS. That's not objectively, we know that's not true because you can run Mac OS on 12-inch MacBooks and they have way worse hardware than what these iPads are rocking. So it's not even a question to me. So if there's basically any form of compromise by putting Final Cut on the iPad, I'm gonna come to the same conclusion is what I'm trying to say. So I know there's a lot of people saying I should review it and I should buy one and try it out and let you know what I think, but the reason I haven't ordered one yet, just for the record, and the reason I'm not jumping up and down to try it out is because I don't think it's going to change my overall view of the iPad. It's still going to be like, okay, it's... The other issue, not only is it hardware constrained to the Mac, spec for spec, it's more expensive than the Mac. Like, it'd be one thing if, okay, the iPad is objectively way cheaper than the Mac, so they don't give it the fully fledged version of whatever, okay, but when you're charging $1,500 or $2,000 for an iPad, I expect that to be able to do everything a $800 Mac can do. You know, when they're putting M2 chips in MacBook Airs, Mac Minis, like, if you're charging that much for a device that has inferior port selection, less battery, less ports, worse speakers, but it has the same chip, come on, we should at least have some software symmetry here, right? Like, and I don't think Final Cut on the iPad's really going to change my mind anyway. So, Micah says it would be interesting to see you try and edit all your videos on the iPad with Final Cut for a month and see if you get used to it. I'm sure I could. I've done videos on this channel. I feel like people are probably forgetting. I've edited videos on this channel using LumaFusion and my A12X iPad. In fact, years ago when this channel was very, very young, I used to edit all of the videos on this channel through my 2015 iPad Pro with no LumaFusion back then. We had no keyboard support. We had no trackpad support. We just had iMovie, and I didn't even have an Apple Pencil for the first few months. So it's possible to do videos on the iPad. It's just not better. And that's where I take issue with it. I'm like, okay, if you're just looking for, like, I want to buy a $300 or $400 iPad and do some light video editing on it, sure, yeah, LumaFusion and even Final Cut or whatever is great for that. It's a great intro to video editing. But if you're trying to justify $1,200 plus iPads and you're still giving them scaled down, skimmed down, watered down Final Cut, and you're not giving them the same... Like, if your purpose is to do some light video editing, you shouldn't be buying an iPad Pro with an M1 chip, which is unfortunately what they require for Final Cut to work. You need an M1 or better. And I'm like, okay, well, if that's your budget, if you're spending that kind of money on a tablet for video editing, you shouldn't be buying that tablet. You should probably just buy a Mac, which will likely save you money, have better ports, more storage, and the fully unlocked version of this software rather than the skimmed down version of it. So I've done it before. I just feel like a lot of people probably just forgot that I've done it and they just want to see me do it again. But I don't I don't know if that's worth it. Should I just do it again for all the people that forgot? You could mirror the display to an HDMI dongle and then put it into a capture card and stream it to your MacBook. Not suggesting you do, but it is an option. I guess to me that defeats the point. It's like if I have to use a Mac to live stream my editing process on my iPad and the editing process on the iPad isn't as good as the editing process on the Mac, why not just use the Mac? I don't know. It's like saying you can charge your electric car by towing it behind a gas vehicle, and it has the regenerative motor, that charges the battery pack. So I'll just have infinite range by driving around my EV by towing it with a gas vehicle at all times. It feels silly to me. Skylar says, you've clearly spent a lot of money on your MacBook and Final Cut. We don't expect you to completely shift your workflow to iPad. We just want you to validate Apple's claims. Well, everyone has a different use case for editing on the iPad. And like I said, I've edited my own videos with LumaFusion before, and it's possible. It's not ideal. It's slower, and it's a lot more compromised, especially because the Files app. Files app on the iPad is so much worse than Finder is on the Mac, and I don't think we're going to get much change to that with iPadOS 17, but truthfully, I'm not going to be I'm not going to be in the country probably when the developer betas or the public betas start becoming available for the new versions of iPadOS, and they've changed how you get betas, which is what I mean by I'm probably not going to be able to get the developer beta. Recharge your car by towing a generator behind you. Right, yeah. It feels silly to use the Mac to live stream your inferior editing process on the iPad. It's an option, but it's not a good option. Like, I don't think editing on the iPad basically should be a challenge. And I've kind of done that many, many times already. Like, try to edit a whole video just on the iPad. Okay, we've done it. Now we can just do it again, but with a different application that costs more than the last application. Yep, it's still possible, but it's still slower and it's still not as good because of the whole import process, and the Files app is all weird, and there could be a completely different version of Files or Finder that comes out with iPadOS 17. So to review the whole thing, and again, it's still not out at this time. It launches on May 23rd, and it could be buggy when it comes out. So I don't know. I feel like my impressions aren't going to be that interesting. Like, I don't know. I feel like reviewing it on the iPad that I'm buying just to review, not to keep, is basically just doing it for the sake of the thumbnail and title. I tried to edit a video on Final Cut or Final Cut on iPad review, but I feel like the end thesis of that video is basically already discovered. The Elysium says Tesla charging stations are powered by diesel. That's absolutely not true, but it just made me laugh reading that. It's just, I hope you're being sarcastic. If not, I'm sorry you think that way. No, Tesla Solar has generated more energy than all the Tesla vehicles have consumed. Final Cut isn't even fully there in the iPad. On the website, it says you'll have to unload the project to your Mac to do more advanced stuff. I don't think they said you have to unload it on the Mac. Let me see the exact wording. I know that they showcased you can share Final Cut projects. I saw that. What's kind of interesting, though, I was just looking at the webpage, is when you open the iPad section, it has its own dedicated tab. More from iPad. Final Cut Pro for iPad. You can just quickly jump straight there. What is it? iMovie import? Oh, I see what it's saying. Why not just have iMovie and iMovie Plus? Where's the one with the Mac? Did I miss it? Angle editor. Scene removal mask. It's like, are these things coming to the Mac version? Or to get them on the Mac version, do you have to, I think it's down here. No? Coming soon, third-party content. Maybe that's side-loading. Where was it? I swear I saw a point. Yeah, there we go. Took a while. Send to Mac. Export a project to Final Cut for Mac to access features like advanced color grading, object tracking, and more. Oh, okay. I see what you're trying to say. Yeah. You have to go to the Mac version, which I don't believe is included in the $5 a month membership. That's a whole separate thing. So you've already spent the $200 or $300 on Final Cut for Mac, and now to access features like advanced color grading, object tracking, and more. Let's see the fine print if we go to number 6. Requires Final Cut Pro 10.6 or later. I don't even know if that one's available yet, but yeah, they're kind of already setting us up for, yeah, it doesn't have everything. I'm not that interested in the advanced color correction. It's more the way the timeline functions. It's not. You're saying very different things, Tailosive. The electric grid is powered by many different things. Most of it is not diesel generators. But you said earlier that that's exactly how electric vehicles are charged. You were saying like all EVs are charged that way. There's a handful that probably relied on a generator a handful of times, but the vast majority of them are powered by completely renewable energy. Tesla made a big page and have a huge document. Read through Tesla's impact report and then get back to me, because it sounds like you don't know what you're talking about. Jasmine says, if they gave the Magic Keyboard a MacBook-sized trackpad, I would switch 100%. I don't think they can, like layout-wise. I just don't think it would fit all that well. Chris Norton, thank you for the super chat. Once again, always unnecessary. Have some cash. What are we talking about? You really don't need to super chat that much, Chris. But basically, we kicked off talking about the zoom lenses. The iPhone 15 regular models are getting rumored to get 48 megapixel sensors that can 2x optical zoom. And then the 15 Pro Max is getting a periscope lens, which goes to 6x optical zoom. Hopefully, it performs pretty great. But I guess the exception is the 15 Pro. I don't think that's rumored to get a different telephoto lens. It's still the 3X, which I personally found bizarre. Having a 2X and 3X button was just very close together when I reviewed the 14 Pro. I didn't run into a ton of circumstances where I was like, okay, 3X is good, 2X is good. Like, you know, I felt like 2X was usually better most of the time. Let's see. Thank you for the super chat. Do you think the influencers create fake iOS 16 bugs? I mean, there's likely a certain amount of fakery that goes on. I don't think so much they create fake bugs as much as people probably just... Bugs are kind of hard to capture because they don't always behave in the same way every time. You can get it to show up once and then you can't get it to show up again. But I do think there's a lot of people that just kind of tweet things or say things like it's super buggy or it's unusable without really getting very specific. And there's not a very easy way to like rate the number of bugs or issues people are having and how it wasn't the tower. Let me see if this actually came back. Yeah, literally as we're talking about bugs. Although this isn't the iOS, this is the T-Mobile home internet. We back? Simon says back. Is anyone else seeing me again? That's weird. That is the gateway because I am no longer connected to the T-Mobile home internet. I am literally connected to my phone's hotspot right now, which is using a T-Mobile tower. It's using the exact same tower. So... sorry about that. I'm live streaming off of my phone hotspot because the T-Mobile Wi-Fi just straight up died. Or it disconnected on the Mac? It seems to be kind of working on the iMac, but it's slow. Let me refresh. I T-Mobiled. It's so hard to review these freaking things, you know. They'll work flawlessly and I'll live stream perfectly for like months and I not have any issue, and then suddenly it just shuts off and it dies without warning. And there's no correlation to it. It's still dead on the Mac. So thank God for Mint Mobile. For some reason the gateway itself must be acting up. Apologize for that. Yeah, Apple doesn't want me talking about iOS, I guess. Although iOS is the one powering this live stream, thanks to my phone. Let's see if I don't know how well the connection will maintain itself, but yeah, the Mac is pulling all of its data through the phone. So sorry if the bitrate gets a little chunky at certain points. I should probably just let the phone sit so it can stabilize. Alpha says, "Wish my glasses had 2x zoom." That would be cool. Hopefully Apple will have a solution for you there with Apple Reality Pro. Yeah, Burkhart joined at the exact right time. Okay. What were we talking about? Status bar got stuck in landscape mode. That's weird. Bugs are hard to find unless you're actively finding them. I guess that's true. Basically, I think that people... That's what we were talking about. I think that people... over-exaggerate a lot of bugs without getting specific about them, and that might make things seem like they're a bigger deal than they really are. But I doubt there's that many people that are just like artificially editing and adding bugs into their phone just for the sake of getting views on TikTok or whatever. Yeah, my phone's charging on the Pixel stand. Nub God Rising super chatted again. Do you think Apple uses slave labor? I tend to think no, but I don't think that means all of the labor is completely ethical. There are very rigorous inspections and things that go on during supply chains. I also tend to think that anytime you go down into supply chains, it's looking for corruption, because honestly, any supply chain you will probably find malpractice or unethical working conditions. It's not just with iPhones. It's also not just with technology. Like the food you have in your fridge that was transported, or some of the ingredients that they got into. There's a big supply chain issues basically root back to anything. So to me, that typically gets brought up when you're trying to... It's because you've run out of things to complain about. Essentially, it comes down to... Sorry, it's so pixelated. The hotspot is known for being less reliable. Maybe the connection will be better if I leave the phone here. That's where it first connected. I know, the bitrate is tanking. This is what we have T-Mobile to think. Is it back on the iMac Pro? The iMac Pro is still connected to T-Mobile, and it's kind of working, but it's slow. Yeah, you'll probably find issues through any supply chain. So to act like Apple has some malpractice or some unethical labor laws in their supply chain, but Samsung doesn't, or Google doesn't. Anything you're watching this video on, if you're capable of watching this live stream right now, there's probably some working conditions that were not great that led to the parts being available that are in the device you're watching. It's not... I don't think there's really a way around it. It's a very complex problem. I don't think it's necessarily slave labor, but there are hard working conditions where they don't make as much as they should. But I think that tends to just be an issue with the country that the product is made in. And Apple is trying to get as much production as they can out of China right now, for many reasons, and I'm sure that's one of them. But there was not... I think it was a year or two ago, there was a big story that Apple got really mad at one of their suppliers that was providing like HDMI ports or something to them, because they found out that one of the suppliers providing them with those HDMI ports was using child labor. And once they found that out, or was not abiding by the whatever it was, I'm not sure if it was child labor, but it was using they were employing people that were too young, or they were still getting paid, but they were under the age requirement for working X many hours or whatever. But I encourage you to do more in-depth research on it, because I think most people that run around and say iPhone uses slave labor, child labor. They don't really know what they're talking about. They've just taken some clip or they've taken some headline, didn't do much research on it, and are just plastering it everywhere. Because truthfully, if your goal is to just not use any product that might have malpractice in the supply chain, you have to live in the middle of the woods and not use anything. You basically can't have internet access. There's some rare earth materials extracted from Africa, that's true, but there's also a lot of recycling of rare earth materials because of that, and Apple wants to have a more, internal recycling group and make sure there's ways to mine minerals ethically, and there's ways to ensure that it's coming from reliable sources. I feel like most people who bring that up aren't doing research. They're just trying to find a reason to stop using something. Well, that means if you bought an iPhone, then you support slave labor. They're not actually thinking. I've watched a documentary on Foxconn. Sorry, the bitrate is so terrible. I wish there was something I can do about it. Maybe I should try to switch back to T-Mobile home internet. Let me refresh it on the iMac. Okay, it seems kind of stable. All right, hang on. We'll see if it pops up here. Yeah, the MacBook doesn't even want to show it. Okay, there it is. Hang on a second. I'm going to try to reconnect to the home internet and see if it performs better, because the hotspot is kind of spotty as well. Okay, just hang tight. Are we back? Okay, I think we're back now. The bitrate looks a lot more stable. Hopefully it stays that way. Ugh. You were doing so good, T-Mobile. You were doing so stable for months. I wasn't having any issues, and then suddenly it all falls apart. Okay, we back with all right. I think T-Mobile home internet had a stroke, and it seems to be more stable now. China also has a lot of those rare materials. Yeah, it's a really complex issue. I'm not trying to say it's not a problem that all of the supply chain is stable and ethical and there's no malpractice, but I'm just saying no supply chain is perfect, unfortunately. Which is why if you're looking for complaints, the same thing happens with electric cars too. If you keep wanting to deny that electric cars are a good thing, that they're better for our air quality and they're safer and better for our future and energy independence, and there's less energy losses in that conversion, then they just fall back on the supply chain. Well, there's supply chain problems. So it's like, yeah, that happens with all things. Because I'm sure the drilling for oil has never been done unethically. What countries do to get access to each other's oil supply. That's always been fine. There's never been an issue with that. Okay. At least Apple and Samsung packages are 100% recycled materials. Yeah, I mean, Apple's trying to get to carbon neutral in the next 7 years. I think Apple probably cares more than most do about the environment. Usually when your company makes that much money, you can afford to be more sustainable and put more emphasis on, recycling. And Apple goes through a lot of hoops to make sure that their iPhones use, sustainably sourced stuff, and Apple creates more energy than they consume, that kind of thing. That's what they're working towards. But yeah, I think it's kind of a, what do you call it, straw man argument. It's like, well, we'll tackle something else that isn't really unique to them, but we're going to pretend like it's unique to them because we don't like such and such brand. Nubgod super chatted again. Oh my God, you just over and over. He said, why do many YouTuber, celebrities, CEO use iPhone? I think it doesn't have anything to do with their size. It's just a lot of people in general. And there's a lot of people that are CEOs and YouTubers. But in general, a lot of people on Earth use iPhones because they work. They're just simple and intuitive, and they're easy to set up. And people like the fluidity of them. They like the simplicity of them. And they're reliable. They're not perfect, but they're reliable enough that people don't like the process of switching phones, switching brands, because that's a whole complex process of switching over contacts and downloading apps and transferring pictures and videos and emails, and it's a big process to switch from an iPhone to an Android. Trust me, I know I've done it many times. It's not necessarily a fun experience for people that just want their tech to work. Um, so as long as the iPhone is reliable enough and good enough experience that people don't feel inclined to switch, then they'll just keep using iPhones because that's what they're used to. And that's what they like. Um, Smaller iPhone boxes save space in ships and trucks. That's true. That's true. A lot of people gave Apple flack for removing the charge brick, which I thought was funny because everything they said about it was entirely and absolutely true. You can move more iPhones more efficiently with less emissions by making thinner packaging. And most people were not using the included brick. Like, they did research on that, and it was proven. Most people were not using the included chargers. They were just using their last charger that they used for their last phone. They would just keep using that one, and they left most of the accessories in the box, which created more e-waste, which was wasteful. So I thought it was a pretty smart move, personally. Any advice to buy the Pixel Fold? Don't. Sorry, Jeff. That's probably not the answer you were looking for. I don't know what do you mean? Advice to buy the Pixel Fold? I don't understand. To me, it seems awfully expensive, and I've reviewed folding phones before, and I don't find them very useful or that much. I just don't. I don't think the form factor of folding phones unlocks or enables that much more functionality. Like, I don't find them. If you really want the Pixel Fold, yeah, I would recommend waiting a year or two for the resale value to tank, because that's a positive for the secondhand market in the regards to Androids. Like, a positive of buying new iPhones, which I don't recommend, but I will at least say objectively and statistically there is evidence that suggests buying a new iPhone, it's more likely to preserve its resale value. iPhones hold their value. Google even acknowledges this. If you're trading in a phone on the Pixel store to cover your costs of the Pixel Fold, they give you a lot of money if you hand them an iPhone, and they don't give you that much if you give them an Android, especially a Pixel, ironically. But yeah, if you want to trade in like an iPhone 12 Pro, I think they'll give you like $800 off. And the 12 Pro is really not worth that, but it's just Google taking the loss because they're trying to convince iPhone buyers to switch. So basically, it's their indirect way of saying that if you are an iPhone user buying a Pixel, we'll give you a lower price than if you're an Android user buying a Pixel, because they want to switch more people. Whereas Android people, I guess they don't care all that much. But the positive of Android depreciation is that if you do want to buy them secondhand, you can get them for real cheap. I saw some people saying rather than buy a Pixel Fold, you can find a Galaxy Z Fold 4 on Swappa for, I think, under $1,000. I saw somewhere. So that you can buy phones that are very similar to the Pixel Fold and maybe in some ways better for like a fraction of the price. So if I had to give some kind of advice to buying the Pixel Fold, for one, it would be don't buy it. I don't think folding phones are that great, and I don't think they're that useful. I think it'll be really impressive for a few hours when you first get the phone. Like, wow, oh my God, it opens and closes. And from what I can tell from the people I know that use folding phones, I have a few friends that I know used them. I bet they would fold it for a little bit, and then after a while, you just kind of use it the same way as a normal phone, and you stop unfolding it when you're out and about. Maybe you unfold it when you're at home, but if you're only unfolding it when you're at home, I think you're better off just buying a tablet that you leave at home for much cheaper and then buying a way better phone, because the folding phones still always have compromises. They have worse batteries. They have worse cameras. The displays don't feel as premium, and of course they cost more. So you're better off just buying flagship phone and a decent tablet that stays at home than you are buying one compromised experience that's worse than the tablet and worse than the flagship but costs more than both. You can get an eBay refurbished Pixel 6 for $172. That's a good deal. I just bought a Fold 4 for under $800. Oh, wow. Okay, well, Jeff, then you already know what to do. Why do you need my advice? Jasmine says, did you see Verizon launched home internet, and how is T-Mobile home internet continuing to be? Well, you asked the wrong day because it's horrible today. It crashed my live stream, which is annoying. But yeah, Verizon has had home internet for a while. I think it's been over a year now, but it's not available where I live. I've checked. Sorry. I would love to review it, but I can't. They won't sell it to me even if I asked for it. Yeah, and you've got the crease and everything. Um, let's see. It really does suck switching over. I got the Pixel 7a as a second phone for testing websites for Android compatibility. It doesn't come with a weather app. Really? John Lewis had a 5% off coupon, so I got it from there rather than Google. Well, at least you got a coupon. Why doesn't it come with a weather app? That's kind of weird. Huh. The crease in the middle drives me bad. It wasn't so much the crease that bothered me, because at a normal viewing distance, and if you just hold the phone normally, I don't see the crease, but it's more the texture that bugs me. Just touching a phone with that kind of soft plastic feel, it doesn't feel luxurious. It doesn't feel like a premium experience, despite costing, $1,800. It feels like you're touching a $200 phone, or a $100 phone, I guess. Feels like you're using a really, really cheap phone. Chris Norton super chatted says, I switched from an iPhone when I switched back. iOS has better features. Well, that's good. I don't even know if it's a feature thing, to be honest. I think it's just an execution thing. iOS just, to me, tends to feel more... It's hard to articulate. I'm trying to figure out what it is. Maybe it's just because I'm biased and I grew up with iPhones, so that's what I'm used to, but... I don't know. It feels more fluid is the only word that comes to mind. It feels more responsive. Android, I don't know what it is. It works. I don't hate Android, for the record. I just think iOS is better. I don't have anything inherently against it. Like, it just feels clunkier. It feels like the UI jumps more. Like, things aren't as optimized. Like, apps have to resize and refit themselves when you open them and stuff. Why buy outdated Apple products over just buying flagship new every 4 to 5 years? Because it costs more. I guess it depends on your definition of buying outdated, but no, I've done a video on how much it costs to, buy a new phone versus... Honestly, I think the price of buying a new phone and selling it every year and just upgrading every time isn't that different from the price of buying a new flagship every 4 to 5 years, but it is different from buying secondhand once every few years. Like if you're buying a secondhand or refurbished iPhones once every 3 to 4 years, you're still spending substantially less than you would buying a flagship every 4 to 5. And that's the great perk of iPhones, is that they continue to get software support years and years after you've bought them. Do you think we might go back to one camera lens on an iPhone? I don't think so. I think it's too cheap and too marketable to keep at least 2 cameras on there. But I'd love to get Verizon Home Internet because I get $5 off for being a visible user. Oh, okay. They got their monopoly discount practices. Margel says, Android has less fluidity compared to the iPhone. A 2016 SE feels smoother than a Pixel 4a in my experience, despite the 4-year age gap. I don't know what it is. I might need to research that more. I'm trying to figure out what is it. I don't really hate Android's design, like the way their home screen works and the app library and the control center. It looks clean. It's a nice looking user interface, but it's something with the way it animates. It just feels scattered. I don't know what it is. Nozzle says, beard's looking much better compared to previous years. Thank you. I don't use anything, no. It's just some people can grow it in more full faster, but no, I've done literally nothing to my beard. Android tablets still don't have a tablet version of Facebook. It's just a stretched out phone app. Well, I don't feel much better about the iPad version, to be honest with you. The iPad version of Facebook still doesn't support split view, even though that's been available for 8 or 9 years, I feel like now. Maybe it's 6 or 7 years. Facebook still doesn't have a dark mode on the iPad, and the iPad still doesn't have a calculator app, still doesn't have optimized battery charging. Just recently got the weather app, so it's like, sure, I'm guessing Android tablets aren't great, but I don't think iPads are much better, honestly, with a lot of basic functionality. I'm sure on the attempting to be pro level, the iPad is probably superior. It's got LumaFusion, and it's about to get Final Cut, and it's going to get Logic, and it's got GarageBand. So the illusion of productivity apps are pretty good, but they're still skimmed down versions. User interface animations make a bigger impact than people give credit for. Yeah, it's not so much functional. It's not a functional issue, the animations, as long as they get you where you're trying to get. But it does affect the way the phone feels, I would say. If it feels clunkier, it's less desirable, I suppose. iOS doesn't need a universal back button, that's why. Well, haven't they kind of gotten rid of that on Android now? I don't know. I feel like there's back gestures, but there's not really a back button anymore. Sorry, there was another question here from Peroski. What would my ultimate iPhone be? Screen body size, features, etc. So I've gotten that question a lot, but it's not what I've learned from switching between phones all the time is that you can kind of get used to anything. It's not like really that much unusable iPhones I've tried, or even Androids. I can get by with them. It's just which one is better, which one is more streamlined or simplified. But I guess if you were asking me personally, like if I could design my dream iPhone, something I'm kind of hoping for that I don't trust the rumors, but also there hasn't been any rumors to support this. What I would love to see is the mini iPhone come back. That's one thing I've really appreciated about both the iPhone 10 and then switching to the SE is that having a small phone that's really comfortable to hold, that fits in your pocket, and is just light is really great. Like it lets you use the phone for a while without your hand getting tired, and it just feels more efficient to have a smaller phone, I guess. And the other thing I've realized is like your eyes kind of reset to whatever screen size you have. Like I don't notice that I have a substantially smaller screen every time I use my SE compared to just a few months ago. I was rocking a 13 Pro Max. But at first it's a little jarring. You go, whoa, this is so much smaller. This is so much different. But then you realize like, well, you hold the screen a little bit closer when it's smaller, or your eyes and your fingers kind of adjust to the layout of things pretty quickly. So I think that if I had to choose a size, I would go small. I want the mini iPhone to come back because people love the 12 mini and the 13 mini. So maybe if the 15 Plus sells horribly, by the time the iPhone 16 or 17 is ready, maybe they'll feel comfortable to revive the mini iPhone again. So I guess, obviously, I wanted USB-C for years, so that goes without saying. And it sounds like Apple's switching to that anyway, so maybe I shouldn't even mention it. But I suppose iPhone 17 mini, I would love. I'd be fine with 2 cameras. I think telephoto probably gets more credit than it needs, especially now with the 48 megapixel approach, which is, it sounds like that's what the regular iPhone 15s are getting. So you can just 2x with that 48 megapixel sensor. Then you have an ultra wide, night mode support and everything. Thunderbolt USB-C port, titanium chassis, dynamic island, or smaller version of dynamic island, whatever. And frosted glass on the back, either in piano black or product red, without a ringer switch. I don't need a ringer switch. So if it's Drew's ideal dream iPhone, that's basically what it would be. Just a small, very powerful iPhone. Oof, thank you for the super chat. That's his name, literally. Oof. Been a big fan for years. Do you think Apple's headset has some cool rumored features, or do you think it will be a flop? Also, will you review it? I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think it could have some cool rumored features, and it can also be a flop. Based on what we've heard of it, I don't think it will be a big seller. Pretty much all of the reports are still pointing to the idea that Apple Reality Pro will be a $3,000 headset, and regardless of what it does, even if it freaking cures cancer, I don't think that many people are going to be able to swing $3,000 on a headset that is rumored to have like a 2-hour battery life. And it's not glasses, remember. It's completely covering your vision. It might have cameras on the outside that portray what's going on around you, but still, we did a stream about this, and most people said even if you can see your surroundings when wearing it, most people are not going to wear it in public because that's just going to be too weird and too dorky. And of course, the battery life, if that dies on you when you're out in the wild, you suddenly just go blind. You can't see anymore. But I'm willing to acknowledge that there's been many things Apple has launched that many of us did not see a future in, and a lot of us thought would flop and fail. Classic examples like the iPod, or the iPhone, or the iPad, or the Apple Watch, or the AirPods. Pretty much everything that Apple sells now that's at meaningful volume, a lot of people were like, that's ridiculous, that's too expensive, no one's going to buy that, this is going to flop. And then it ends up actually being pretty great. Even things made during the Steve Jobs era and after the Steve Jobs era. I remember I was making tech videos, and I was pretty dismissive of it as well, even. Burkhart, it's called a joke. I need to be more clear with /s. I'm just saying, anything Apple comes out with, people will complain about it being too expensive or it's going to flop because Apple's easy to hate on. There's more Apple hate videos and more Apple parody videos than any other tech brand in the world. People just love to criticize new things that they don't understand the market for very well. AirPods were a classic example, which ended up becoming like the most popular headphones in the world. If AirPods were their own business, they would be big enough to be in the S&P 500. But I remember very clearly the day AirPods came out because everyone was making fun of them. Everyone was saying they looked like Q-tips or hair dryers, and Steve Jobs is rolling in his grave. Everyone was riffing on him and hating on him. So that's why I'm hesitant to just give in to my instinct, which is that, yeah, $3,000 for a headset that can play a few AR games seems really stupid, and I don't think that many people are going to buy it. I want to wait and hear Apple's pitch. I think it's too early to even after it comes out, honestly, even after they start shipping them and start delivering them, it's probably too early to dictate, is this going to be a long-term success or long-term flop, short-term flop. People love the rant, yeah. People love my Pixel rants. People love ranting on Apple products. I love ranting on Apple products when I think it's deserved. So yeah, there's just, because it's a new thing and because it's inherently just going to be expensive, I think it will be very easy to hate on it. It'll be very easy to say this is going to fail. And I'm not saying it's guaranteed to long-term be a success. I'm just saying we've been in these situations before where everyone's expecting an Apple product to fail and then it ends up becoming not necessarily like the next big thing or bigger than the iPhone, but it ends up finding a market that's really passionate and excited about it and continues to use it. A lot of people, I think, are comparing the original HomePod to the Apple Reality headset. It was very controversial when it first came out, and then it didn't really go anywhere. They came out with a cheaper version later that did a lot better with the HomePod Mini, but then they still kind of refreshed the original HomePod again. And there's a small section of the market that's passionate about those original HomePods, but still most of the market doesn't really care. That's what I think this is going to be like. There's probably going to be some people that are really into mixed reality AR experiences that are gonna pay whatever Apple wants for the Apple Reality headset and say, it's expensive, but it's better than anyone else's. It's got the most fluid animation and it's got the best, camera system, or it's got the best setup, and it fits in with the Apple ecosystem better than any other headset can. So you might find a really passionate audience for it, but it's not necessarily as big as the Apple Watch or AirPods are. So it's hard to call it like a flop per se. Excuse me. So I don't know. I think that it's probably somewhere in the middle. I I don't think it's the next big thing. I think there's probably a lot of channels that are going to act like this is going to replace the iPhone, or this is going to kill the need for an iPhone, and I don't agree with that at all. I think the iPhone is kind of a once in a century type product. I don't think it's the type of thing that you replace or get rid of within a decade or two. Yeah, the vocal minority. The HomePod is still bad. It's basically Siri locked inside an OK speaker. I'm in agreement with you, but I still know a ton of people that were super passionate and super excited when they refreshed it and were lining up to buy it. I know a lot of people that love the sound quality of it, so I think a lot of people would push back on the description that it's an okay speaker, but I'm not an audiophile, so I still use the original HomePod with my Apple TV every day, and it's fine. It sounds decent. I think it sounds good, but I don't use Siri at all. I use the keyboard in my MacBook. Sick boop patty. I keep asking what keyboard I use, like that's going to be some great revelation. Ah, yes! The Logitech. Blah, blah, blah. It's worth noting that the Reality Pro is a very different thing from Apple Glass, and people also don't realize this. Yeah, I think it will be refreshing if Apple actually unveils it and kind of... I think Apple has the best marketing in the world, essentially. Like, they can make really basic phone upgrades seem like a really huge deal. And I'm not really too sold on the idea of, like, people buying Apple Reality headsets. Like, what do they need them for? What's the use case for them? Why should I buy that? Why should I spend that much money on it? And because Apple's so good at marketing, I'm actually fascinated to see how they pitch it. I'm not that invested in the product itself. Like, I don't think I could justify it. I'm just trying to visualize what could I do with it? What would justify that expense? And I can't think of anything. I mean, sure, I'll probably review it. I don't know when it'll be available. Maybe it'll be available later this year. If it's available to order and they start shipping them later in June, I'm not going to be able to because I'm going to be out of the country. So I probably will not be, even if I wasn't leaving the country, I probably will not be the first channel to try it out because Marquez and iJustine and Your Average Consumer and all those guys are probably going to get it before I do because they're on Tim Cook's nice list. So regardless, I'm not going to be the first one to try it out. But eventually, whenever I get back or something, I'm sure I'll check one out and tell you my thoughts on it. But I'm still fascinated as a fan of Apple as a brand and as a company and how they optimize their products to work for each other. Like, I'm still very interested to see how they sell it. Are they going to sell it as a living room demo? Are they going to showcase it as a gaming device, or is it a productivity device? And I'm sure it's a mix of all these things, but how much of each? You know, is it like, are they coming up with use cases or things that we haven't thought of? I don't know. I'm curious. I'm very curious about it, but I'm not like invested in it, I guess. I'm not like definitely going to buy one because I want to use it for something. I can't think of a use case that would justify that expense personally. I agree, Drew. I want to taste the Android waters, but it's like something about navigating Android OS feels different and makes me want to go back to touching an iPhone ASAP. Yeah, I'm with you there, T-Dot. The HomePod is a bad product, and that doesn't stop me from loving it. That's a good take, Dylan. I appreciate that. The Logitech Indiscernible? That's my go-to. My HomePod Mini is a paperweight on my desk. I just use it as a home hub. See, this is why I know you guys probably are annoyed by my obsession with it, but I really like the Pixel tablet. I just think Google kind of knocked it. I mean, I haven't tried it yet, and maybe I'm forgetting how horrible Android on a tablet is. That's entirely possible. But I think the reason I love it so much is because I have such a disrespectful, degrading viewpoint on tablets now. You know, like, my phone does everything for me now. Like, I make all my thumbnails on my phone. I do the outro credits on my phone. I use my phone as a continuity camera. And phones are still even great media consumption devices. And I just don't find split screen on a bigger tablet all that useful. And I know it's not just me. Like, I know there's so many people I've heard that, like, I bought an iPad, but I just kind of leave it laying around and I forget to charge it. And my family's this way too. My sister used to have an iPad and she kind of quit using it because her phone was good enough and it's more convenient. You know, you can hold it with one hand and keep it in your pocket and use it on the go. And she has a laptop and a Mac that she uses for work stuff, but when she's not using her Mac, she uses her phone. And the tablet just kind of ran out of functional reasons to exist unless you're doing really basic stuff like reading or watching YouTube on a slightly bigger screen. My parents as well. Both my parents had iPads that they used to use all the time, and they just kind of quit using them because their phone screens got bigger. And now they're just comfortable using their phone for everything. So they hardly use their tablets anymore. And I was like, yeah, that feels like the iPad and tablets in general have this identity crisis where they can't really figure out what to do with them. They can't really find a great use case other than it's the couch device. Like, it's slightly better than your phone, but most people, I think, still use a phone. And I also think there's a slight identity crisis with higher end smart speakers. You know, like, we've figured out that people will buy cheap, $50 to $100 smart speakers, like the Nest Mini or the Echo Dot or the HomePod Mini. That's kind of the price range. If you're just selling a speaker with a digital assistant, that's about as expensive as people are comfortable going. But if you go higher than that, you need to offer something else. You need to offer a visual. So that's why for smart speakers more expensive than $100, the best-selling ones are usually like the Nest Hub or the Nest Hub Max or whatever. And those more expensive speakers have a display, and you can take calls on those or see your doorbell feed or have it be a smart home controlling device. And I feel like the Pixel tablet, it might be botched in execution. Google's known for kind of boxing the execution on good ideas, but at least the idea I'm really sold on. Like, the tablet has a resting place. I think that's kind of the biggest problem I face with tablets is, like, you'll go days sometimes without using them, and then when you go to pick them up again, they're dead. So to have, like, a home for it to go back to, I'm done using my tablet inductively, not really inductive, I know, but magnetically it just attaches to this little speaker, and now it turns back into a smart hub device that can control the home and also be a digital assistant with a visualizer to show you recipes or play videos for you or be the smart home controller. And you can disconnect that display and you can play music on it and have lyrics or now playing controls and everything. Like, to me, this is where tablets and smart speakers that cost more than $100, that's where it should go. Not this, like, $300 just really loud smart speaker. I don't think that has gone anywhere. Like, I don't think that many people will spend big money. That's why Google stopped selling the Home Max and why Apple hasn't tried very hard with the original HomePod, and Amazon hasn't had much success with more expensive, smart speakers either. But I think this is the perfect middle ground, around $500 for a tablet that can charge itself on that speaker, outputs through the speaker, and then if you want, you can take the tablet off, use it around the house, but then it goes back and it has a place to stay topped off rather than focus on, oh, that's right, I got to charge my tablet and my phone. That's just, I want to see Apple's take on it too. I would love to see an iPad / HomePod. iPod! There's the name! Who never heard that before? I want the iPad to go the way of the iPod is what I'm trying to say. Marangel says the Pixel tablet solves the identity crisis that the tablet category has been having for years. Yeah, that's why I'm excited for it. Ian Andors, thank you for the super chat. The best device for me would be kind of a watch with a small screen that is big enough to use the essentials plus battery life, but still less distracting than a phone screen, like 2 Apple Watches together. I feel like I remember talking about that in the old days. I had that concept of, like, Apple Watch, what was it, like a gauntlet? It's like a cuffling. It's just a bigger display that could still fit on your wrist that was more widescreen with a larger size QWERTY keyboard that you could swipe on. Yeah, I'm with you there. I'd be curious to see the Apple Watch go into a wider, 2 Apple Watches stuck together. That'd be curious. I'd be curious to see what that would be like. Tablets are like a camper van. Phones are cars we use every day. Right, and you notice not that many people have camper vans. Margel says, I don't know what I'm going to do with my iPad when I finish college. I only use it as a note-taking tool. Everything else, I use my phone and laptop. That's kind of in the space I'm in now. I really don't use my iPad for much of anything these days. I do everything on either my MacBook or my phone, just like you. So I'm curious to see the tablet try to take a different use case. And I think the Pixel tablet is a perfect idea in theory. The execution could be flawed, but the reason why I didn't find it clickbait, sorry if you found it clickbait, or the reason I was comfortable making a video titled, I want to ditch my iPad for a Pixel tablet. Tixel tablet. Oh, man. I was comfortable writing that is because at this point, I'm ready to ditch my iPad regardless of how good the Pixel tablet is. Maybe the Pixel tablet sucks. Like, I saw so many people commenting, oh, it's so much worse than the iPad. It doesn't have a good stylus support, and there's not as good app support. And I'm like, that kind of stuff is meaningless to me now because I'm not using my iPad for anything. Like, I do video design or video editing on my laptop and thumbnail design on my phone and media consumption on my phone, and I watch movies and shows on my TV. And I can, of course, if I want a mobile bigger screen, I can still use my MacBook as a media consumption device. So my point is, with my current workflow and my current ecosystem, the tablet has basically been pushed out. So the best bet at me still using a tablet is turning it into a hybrid smart speaker thing, because then, at least when I'm not using my tablet, it's doing other things. It's now a smart speaker, and it's in the kitchen, and we can take calls on that, or we can watch videos on that while you're doing other things. It lets you listen to music, or it lets you look at security camera footage around the house, smart home features. Then it has something to do when I'm not using it, and it keeps the battery topped off. So maybe the Pixel tablet has horrible optimization and it's really clunky, but I don't really care about iPads have so much better app support. It's like, all I'm doing on a tablet now is going to be watching YouTube, listening to music, maybe checking email, like taking video calls, smart home controls. So kind of like the first party native apps that are already on there, that's really all I intend on using for the most part. Not so much third-party apps. Like, I'm not going to be that worried about Final Cut or video editing, because I know that the iPad's going to give me a skimmed-down version of that anyway. So why would I spend the $1,000+ and pay $5 a month for something that's not going to be as good as my Mac? And the Mac is cheaper than the iPad in many ways. So iPads are really good in a work environment. It depends on the work environment, but yeah, I can see the use case for it. My iPad Pro 2021 is sleeping in the drawer. MacBooks are productivity. iPhones for every other thing like camera, audio player, social media device, etc. Yeah, okay. So Deepak is right there with me. Alex H says, to be honest, what Randy said about putting 14 Pro cameras on the iPad Pro actually makes a lot of sense. So you can edit right there in Logic and Final Cut. Yeah, I mean, we've been suggesting that for years. It's like, if you want to try to justify a price that high, you should just give it all the hardware. The fact that they still don't is kind of confusing. Simply Sora says, my iPad is about entertainment machine and my Mac is for work. It's my phone I hardly use unless I'm out of the house. That's interesting. But yeah, if it's just an entertainment machine, to me, I don't really think the Pixel tablet needs to have the best fluidity or the most smooth operating system. If all it needs to do is play YouTube or open a streaming app, open Disney Plus, open Discovery Plus, play. I don't really care if that's not the most clean UI-friendly thing. It does have a Tensor chip inside it, so it's got, Google Silicon and Google hardware. Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. We're seeing, like, the cracks in the walled garden are growing a little bit, I feel like. Katrina says, I use my iPad for note-taking at work, put it next to my laptop for Microsoft Team calls and for media consumption, so I use it a lot. I think that's where the iPad probably shines the most, is Apple Pencil features. because you can't do that on a Mac. It's like if you need to draw and write out notes and graphs and things for numbers. That's when I used my iPad the most too. Was when I was in college, but I slowly realized everything you do in college ends up being mostly pointless. But no, realistically, like if you're a student, I see more of a justification for a tablet with a pencil, but to me, you do not need to get the $1,000 iPad for Apple Pencil features. You can get a $300, $400 iPad with Apple Pencil features these days. And I would recommend you not buy it new, because the new ones are just trying to convince you to sign up for another membership. It's just getting progressively more expensive to get an M1 iPad. Pixel tablet could have been loaded with Chrome OS. I don't get why people ask for that. What is the advantage of Chrome OS? All Chrome OS really is Google Chrome taking over the entire computer. And Google Chrome is already on Android. There's this big development. Well, now Chrome OS can run Android apps. Okay, why don't we just leave Android on there? Chrome OS is not a feature to me. Chrome OS is like a downside. And it runs Chrome OS. Oh. Like, what is the advantage of having Chrome OS? I think there's some Linux coding thing that maybe software engineers could take advantage of if it runs Chrome OS, but usually that's a reason to avoid something if it runs Chrome OS. I would be more... Yeah, Pixel Slate was Chrome OS and everyone hated it. That's true. So was the Pixel Book, I think. The Pixel Book ran Chrome OS. I think they'd be better off just bringing more pro apps to Android, basically. I think Google could really start to take the offense on the ecosystem thing if they came up with more pro software. Like, it must not be that expensive. You know, I was just thinking about this the other day. If Google really wanted to turn things around, start threatening the Apple ecosystem, they should buy LumaFusion. I mean, at least for the video editing side of productivity, which I think is a pretty big chunk of it. At least in the YouTube space, right? There's all these YouTubers that are mostly editing their videos on Apple hardware of some kind. People in the chat earlier were saying a bunch of YouTubers edit on iMovie. I don't know if I believe you, but okay, for the sake of the example, I'll believe you. But if Google bought LumaFusion and kind of tweaked it a bit and optimized it for more keyboard mouse input, and then integrated some more YouTube native features like the caption support and the like, you know how Pixel has the really capable like tensor chip that can automatically dictate when you play things back? If you took that dictation feature that adds the periods and the pacing and then built that into the captions feature of the video that you're editing, so that the automatic captions were already built in by the time you uploaded the video, and you can build in chapters automatically. Like, you can just, in Final Cut they have something called markers, which just puts a little tab, and if you could mark certain parts of the timeline and label them so that when you upload the video, it already has time codes built in. And you could even drag in infotainment title cards that show up in the corner. Because right now it's kind of awkward when you do that. You have to edit the video. Like when Marquez says, if you want to watch that, click this little title card in the corner. He has to point to it, edit that in Final Cut, export the video, upload the video. Once the video is done processing, then he adds the title card at that specific time code. Rather than do it separately, you could do it in the timeline. If there was a YouTube-friendly pro-class video editing software, and then you optimize that to run on Google Silicon through a G4 Max chip, whatever you want to call it, I think that's how Google could really start to threaten the MacBook space. And you build that into Chrome OS, or you build that into Android, whatever. I would be fascinated to watch that. Google software engineers mostly use Macs for their development. I know, I've heard that. I found that kind of funny. It's a bit more versatile than Android. That's good, but for fairly niche things, I imagine. It's not a bad idea. If the Apple walled garden cracks keep coming, it will be fragmented like Android. No, I just mean it's not that Apple is fragmented. It's just that the advantages of buying a bunch of Apple hardware is maybe not as great as it used to be. Um, Google would also need something on par with Xcode or Versus Code. Android Studio doesn't really cut it. I'm surprised they haven't jumped on that, considering Google does so much software engineering. That's like their whole thing with AI and search and algorithms. And why are they using Apple hardware for everything? Um, but yeah, Tensor G2 is between A11 and A12 in terms of performance, which is fine for most things. I don't really care so much about the raw Geekbench performance. It's just, can this continue getting software support, and can this continue getting updates years after you buy it, you know? It's called a joke. Sorry. Are you a walled garden team or open source team? I'm in favor of whatever results in the tech working. Most of the time, I think that's walled garden. But I think there's growing greenery, like there's grass and flowers starting to bloom outside of the garden. Whereas before, I felt like just a couple of years ago, there was the walled garden, which I love and I'm still in, but everything outside of it was a desolate wasteland. Like, it was just dirt, prickly thorns, thistles everywhere. Like, there was nothing outside of the walled garden. So people are like, yeah, you're stuck in the walled garden in the Apple ecosystem. And it's like, yeah, but why leave? There's nothing out there. Now I'm starting to feel more, maybe there's something out there. Maybe it's, I'm not saying it's better. I'm not saying there's, more lush fruit or more things to enjoy. I'm just saying it doesn't look as prickly. It doesn't look as desolate as it used to. This is why I called my whole channel Tailosive Tech from the beginning, not Apple Sheep, is because I want the option and the ability to explore what's outside Apple and talk about things not just Apple if I so desire. Even though, yes, I mostly talk about Apple, I wanted to be able to have the branding freedom to go outside of the ecosystem when things outside of the ecosystem were interesting. I find it funny when Google developers use Apple devices. Dude, who cares? I don't care. I just think it's funny. There's two separate things. You can not care about something and still find it funny. I don't care about what Steve Carell does in his personal life, but I still find him funny. A new Pixel tablet is a cactus. Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. Outside of the walled garden, we have found a prickly pear cactus, and it's a little sharp and it's a little jagged. It's not the kind of tree you want to climb, but it's got a little fruit on it, and you pick off some of those pears, and you have to work a little harder to get the thorns off of it, but you take a few bites and you go, yeah, it's pretty good, it's kind of fruity, it's kind of sweet. I like that. That's perfect. Thank you, Skylar. That's the exact analogy I was looking for. Apple's cloud services are hosted on Google, so it works both ways. Yeah, but you don't interact. I don't have to buy a Google, one storage plan to use iCloud. Whereas if you're using Apple hardware to code your Google algorithms or whatever, you're literally having to buy MacBooks from Apple yourself. Whereas, at least on the end user. James says, you want the option to choose something you don't want to choose. Kind of. Although at this point, I'm really unsure if I'll ever buy, to keep at least an iPad again. I'll buy iPads to review, I guess, but I don't see a use case that the iPad could come up with that would make me go, yeah, I would buy an iPad, because I've worked it out of my ecosystem. I just don't have a use for it now. So it's very hard to justify buying another one. Michael Corcoran says, I actually think the Pixel tablet could be enticing a year from now on eBay. Android devices depreciate fast, probably be at 40 cents on the dollar in a year. I think that's very true. There's a lot of savings to be made by going secondhand, and it's starting at $500, which I already think is a really compelling price. In a year, it could be $350. It's about the same price as the iPad 9, except this Pixel tablet has USB-C. It comes with a charging speaker, It has a ultra wide camera that zooms in on you like center stage. It's 11 inches. It's got a laminated display. Still probably getting software support. And my one big hope is just please give it optimized battery charging. Don't leave that battery at 100% when it's connected to the charging dock at all times. Um, I'm thinking of upgrading from iPhone 11 to Pixel. I don't have any other Apple products. All of my convos are on swap. Honestly, the hardest thing for me if I wanted to switch to a Pixel would be the wallet app. I don't really care about the iMessage stuff. And there's probably some third-party workarounds for AirDrop. They're not ideal, but I could find a way around it. But the wallet app, especially if you're an Apple Card user and you've got the savings account, which I still love. I still think that's a great system, and that's a great. I love the idea of Apple becoming their own bank. I'm all in favor of this. Like, please just launch a checking account, and I can just straight up leave my existing banks, which suck. And the high interest rate is wonderful on the savings account, and I love the Apple Card. It's so simple, and the UI is so clean. Yeah, like you can't access all of that on the web. If you go to the Apple Card web, it doesn't give you all of the transactions, and I don't think it gives you control over the savings account, as far as I'm aware. Um, so you don't have the wallet app on the iPad even, and you don't have it on the Mac. The only way you can manage that wallet is through an iPhone. So that would be the hardest thing. That's like the hardest anchor. That's the hardest nail in the ecosystem for me that keeps me from leaving. Not that I really want to leave in the first place. There's some nice cacti outside the walled garden, but I don't think I'm really there yet. Depending on how Final Cut and Logic turn out, I might genuinely upgrade my 2020 iPad Pro since I use high and can't work on the go with my Mac Studio. If you're mainly interested in Final Cut on the go, I would highly encourage you to just get a MacBook Air. I don't think the performance differences between an iPad Pro and a MacBook Air are going to be that different, and MacBook Air is going to give you the fully unlocked version of Final Cut, and you could just buy it once instead of pay monthly for it. That's what I would do if I were you. Like, if you're just looking for a mobile Final Cut solution, I don't think iPad is my first choice or second choice. No, I don't think the iPad will go the way of the iPod either. I think I did a video on that. I think they're giving it 5 years of security patches, just like the phones, although I would double check that before I actually made a purchase. Even if not, I mean, it's $350. It's not, you're not missing out on that much. Am I going to get a Pixel Fold and or Pixel tablet? I'm not that interested at all in the Pixel Fold, to be honest. I'm not getting anything on launch day because by the time the Pixel tablet and Pixel Fold are delivering, I'm not going to be here, so I just can't take delivery of them. It's just, we've had these trips planned for months, so I can't change my plans around for them. I'm not terribly interested in the Fold. I'm very interested in the Pixel tablet, but similar to what Corcoran is saying, I'm more interested probably in buying them secondhand because Android depreciates so quickly. You'll probably be able to get a Pixel tablet at a decent discount in the not too distant future. Why does iPad only show you some transactions and not others? Seems like a bug more so than a design choice. Well, it's weird. You have to access it through settings, and they don't include all of the settings you need. So it's kind of a mess. So I don't even know if I did buy the Pixel tablet, I probably wouldn't buy it new, at least if I were buying it to keep. But I'm far more interested in that, and I probably won't be able to check it out until maybe August. But August is when we're getting close to iPhone season, so I don't know if I would have time to fill. You can likely find a Pixel in a retail store on launch day. They won't sell out and probably will be cheaper than Google Store. I am not near a retail store, and I don't plan on going to one to get one. When I saw the Pixel Fold at Google I only had one word in mind when they opened it and showed the cheap plastic film on top. Ew. Yeah, it feels awfully similar to the Z Fold, and I don't think just because it's made by Google that's somehow going to make the tablet far more or the Fold far more enjoyable than a Z Fold. It might make it a little bit better, but anyway. Thing is, though, I still use my iPad for media and only ever use the MacBook for mobile work, so I'd almost feel like a worse financial decision to go for the MacBook. I don't know. I don't understand that personally. How would it be a worse financial decision if it costs less? Your laptop could definitely still be a media machine. I don't think in terms of media consumption there's anything your iPad can do that your laptop can't. Honestly, the MacBook's probably going to have better speakers, but just think about it is all I'm saying. If you're really convinced, okay, I hope you enjoy it, but like think about it. Think about the price of buying an M1 MacBook Air, which is going to come with 256 gigs of storage, front-facing speakers, 2 USB-C ports, 2 Thunderbolt ports, and a headphone jack, versus an M1 or M2 iPad Pro, which is, if you want the 13-inch size, is going to be over $1,100, 128 gigs of storage, 1 Thunderbolt port, no headphone jack. And yeah, if you're using it for video editing, you probably want more than 128 gigs of storage, right? So that's going to turn it into a well over $1,000. And you can find M1 MacBook Airs for $850 from Apple, certified refurbished, or $700 through eBay. And that comes with a keyboard and a trackpad and everything. I don't think the Pixel tablet has a headphone jack. I don't really care if it does or not, but I'm assuming it doesn't. The phones don't. But anyway, I need to get going here, but I appreciate the super chats. You guys were awfully generous today for no reason. And I also need to give a very, very special shout out to everybody on Tailosive Tech Ultra, both new and old subscribers. We got some new ones today. So big shout out and thank you to Tyler Forte, Riley McGinnis, Bobby Forsey, Chris, Hasiel Para Castañada, and Nicholas Lithicum. Linthicum. I got to get better at pronouncing that. Thank you all for supporting the channel directly. I appreciate you all, and hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye. And thank you, J Money, for 20 months.